برو بخط بمکن دست خود دختر جان و دنیا سار افغانستان دختر جان برو بخط بمکن دست خود دختر جان و دنیا سار افغانستان دختر جان زنگ بخط میخواند دم 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 با دست نویشم زندگانی دم دم برو بخط بمکن.
Please welcome to the stage, Mila Ibrahim.
The video you just saw was recorded 4 months before Afghanistan fell. It was the first time I ever faced such enormous uncertainty. I could have ended up in Pakistan without access to education as an undocumented refugee, or I might have been sent back to Afghanistan, where I would have been stripped of my value and rights as a human being. So at that time, I had to say yes to leaving. After a year of full of ups and downs, my family and I made it to Canada. Now, when it comes to refugees, people often assume moving to a new country means starting from zero. I don't believe that's true. Refugees carry a wealth of experience, wisdom, and courage. Yet when I first arrived in Canada, I didn't feel like I carried any of that. I had just started 10th grade and was simply grateful to continue my education and be with my family. But over time, I noticed something. Afghanistan was almost always described through the lens of gender inequality, poverty, and war in the Western world. And while these issues are real and must be addressed, I felt something was missing. The human side of Afghanistan. The side I still miss today. School trips with friends to perform on national TV, evenings filled with laughter over shared tea, and the place where I first learned to stand against injustice and taboos. Afghanistan was a loving home, despite the unsafety and political instability. It was still the country where I found my voice, where history was filled with subjugators and oppressors, yet also with the most outspoken and courageous people I know, like my mother, who lived through the first Taliban regime, but still taught me to fight for my rights. So when I realized this gap in how Afghanistan was understood in the West, I began sharing my story. It was painful to relive those moments, but I knew it was necessary. Because that lack of awareness was one reason the world hesitated to invest in Afghan girls' futures. That's why I created Her Story, a platform where Afghan girls can share their own experiences with the mission to build a future where Afghan women are seen, heard, respected, and included in the conversations shaping their lives and world. We interview girls still in Afghanistan who refuse to give up, finding ways to create and learn by starting clothing brands, launching online photography archives, painting, or building small business despite the restrictions. Since the Taliban's return, women and girls have been stripped of their rights piece by piece. First, they were banned from attending school beyond 6th grade. Then, women were barred from working, from choosing how to dress, from leaving their homes freely. They were banned from gyms, parks, and even from speaking in public. Many provinces lost internet access under Taliban orders, and most recently, books written by women have been banned in universities. This is the erasure of women from the face of the country. They are being silenced, excluded, and denied any role in shaping their own lives. That's why it's more important than ever to speak up. Afghanistan is living through a form of gender apartheid, and the world must be remembered of that, and not just through tragic headlines, but by witnessing the potential of Afghan girls. That's why our team at Her Story is launching a new talk show series where we will host Afghan women in the diaspora, the businesswomen, the engineers, the actresses, the singers, and change makers, sharing their stories, their wisdom, and their courage with the world. What's happening in Afghanistan is not just an Afghan issue, it's a global issue, and it needs our attention now more than ever. I know it can feel overwhelming when human rights are under attack around the world, but I want to remind you that every action you take, big or small, matters. Whether it's fighting for girls' education, refugee rights, or human rights, we must be reminded that our voices matter. There's a saying I once heard: only those who have lost their voices truly understand the value of speaking up. But I don't believe everyone needs to lose their voice to believe in something. I know we all here share the same belief, a vision of building a better world. That's why we're here. And as long as we hold on to that belief, we can achieve it together. Last year, I attended CGI for the first time and was inspired by the leadership and the journey of Secretary Clinton. So much that I applied to Wellesley College, just because she did. And just like her, I got in. I'm back this year, and I'm introducing her to the main stage. It is now an honor to welcome Secretary Clinton to the stage.
Am rarely speechless. But thank you so much, Mila, for that introduction, but much more than that, for sharing your story and for being part of the CGI community. I am so excited she's going to Wellesley, my alma mater. It's a thrill for me. And certainly, I hope her story, her individual story, and her story that she tells about Afghan women is an inspiration to all of us to keep going no matter the challenges we face. Because Neela was unafraid to literally lift her voice, as we saw in the beginning video, as a 13-year-old singing despite the terrible taboos and oppression that girls and women face in Afghanistan, which is gender apartheid. And now here she is, still speaking and giving other Afghan women a chance for their voices to be heard. You know, the inspiration that she gives to me is how I feel about this CGI meeting as we wrap up. Over the last 2 days, you certainly have lifted me, but I think all of us, with your voices, your energy, and your commitments. You know, when Bill started CGI 20 years ago, the goal was to build a community to bridge the gaps between what the private sector could produce and the public sector could provide, to form a community of doers and change makers. And since then, more than 10,000 partners have made commitments to action that have changed countless lives. And today's CGI's model of collective commitment is more urgent than ever before. To help us meet this moment, when Bill and Chelsea and I were talking with our CGI team about what this year should look like, we brought back a model that CGI had developed to respond to the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, working groups. Some of you might remember that we met in Chicago to really focus on what needed to be done in our own country and around the world because of what had happened in the economy with the collapse of the financial system. And the response to this model of working groups and bringing people together to literally pull up a chair to a table and get to work has been incredible. Now, I know a couple of blocks away at the UN, there has been a lot of gloom, and sadly for good reason. But on this side of 6th Avenue, over 1,100 people from 63 countries spanning the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors have stood up with what one attendee called dignified optimism. Nearly half of you who joined our CGI working groups are first-time CGI attendees. And these rooms have been overflowing, not just with enthusiasm, but literally with people. More chairs had to be brought in, more space had to be made. People were sitting second chair around some of the tables. And look, I know it can feel pretty lonely right now to be someone who cares about the fate of humanity. You know, that's a value that I'm proud to share with you. Because at the end of the day, you know, who we are, how we treat each other, what we do with our precious time on this earth really, really matters. And coming together this week at CGI is an antidote to the kind of despair and concerns and even fear that we have seen over the last months. Our working groups have been a chance to stop wringing our hands and rolling up our sleeves instead. And we are just starting to process feedback. We've had dozens of conversations in each of these working groups that are so memorable and point forward to action. But let me give you a glimpse of just a few of the next steps that will inform the action agendas going forward. And you can cheer for your working group if you are so inclined. Out of the Innovative Finance Working Group, Kiva Microfunds, a longtime CGI partner, will launch a new social enterprise fund of at least $10 million in 2026 in partnership with corporate foundations, because we are all in this together. The activists, the philanthropists, the corporate representatives. The Health Working Group focused on using AI to overcome systemic gaps in chronic care. One project that came out of this group will expand maternal telehealth in Zimbabwe, something that we hope will be a life-saving innovation. In the Education Working Group, the Clinton Foundation's own program, Too Small to Fail, which works with families and other adults in young children's lives to read, talk, and sing to these children to build their brains, they have formed a partnership with Unidos US to lead a conversation about expanding access to learning in the early years. And the group is exploring a pilot program in 3 US cities in 2026 to provide immigrant families with early education resources to help their own children prepare. The Human Rights and Democracy Working Group focused on issues like accelerating women's democratic participation and defending LGBTQ+ rights in these tough times. We also heard ideas from civic education programs for at-risk youth in Northern Ireland, as well as anti-authoritarian initiatives worldwide. This is an all hands on deck for democracy and human rights, and we are going to do our part. Members of our climate working group dug into the tough realities of climate change, which, just by the way, is not a hoax, despite what we heard at the UN this week. In fact, they came out with a number of bold plans, including creating a water fund to unlock economic opportunities for millions of people, led by our longtime partners at water.org. Building climate adaptation hubs across the tropical belt, starting at COP30 in November in Brazil, and opening new markets to support regenerative farmers who need our support to find those markets so that we can change the way agriculture is done so it's more sustainable, providing food for people without contributing to the climate crisis. The Economy Working Group focused on challenges like the care economy and access to capital. Out of that discussion came a commitment to launch a global network for national service that will strengthen, expand, and scale national service programs around the world. One of the ways to bridge divides and bring particularly young people together to work on behalf of a common cause. The Truth and Information Working Group discussed ways to cut through misinformation and disinformation and focus on building community. In the next year, a top priority will be advocating for state and local leaders in this country and around the world to enact responsible regulation on tech platforms and to give users more ownership over their private data, a very important piece of our response. And lastly, the Humanitarian Response Working Group emphasized the need for innovation, preparedness, and localized responses to humanitarian crises around the world, especially as government aid budgets are slashed. And this includes action items like creating a shared information system among NGOs responding to disasters, new funding opportunities, and innovative research-based tools to find out what's working and how to do more of that while discarding perhaps old-fashioned approaches that no longer are having the effect we want. So these are literally just snapshots of some of the commitments and partnerships and networks and ideas that came out of the working group. So let's take a moment to give a big round of applause to all of our working groups. But as enthusiastic as I am, I have to admit, this can seem like a pretty dark time. But as one of my favorite predecessors, as First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, memorably said, "It's better to light one little candle than curse the darkness." And so that's what we're doing here at CGI. We're lighting as many lights as we can in the darkness. And we will tend them. We will keep them going. We will help them grow. We will pass on our light to others so that they can light their own way forward. We've seen this time and again at CGI. You know, at last year's meeting, we launched the Coalition for Mutual Aid for Sudan. The conflict in Sudan has been the most deadly, has displaced the most people, has caused the most horrific hardship that is imaginable. And we wanted to join hands with people who cared about doing what they could to alleviate the suffering and to support the Sudanese people who had been so committed to democracy just a few years ago that they overthrew a dictator. And then they saw men fighting for power, waging a civil war against one another in order to dominate. And they have done so in a violent, terrible conflict. So the people who came together to make a commitment to Sudan have been working diligently since that time here at CGI. And I have to say, their impact has been so remarkable in such terrible, hard circumstances. Their example is how the working groups should work. Come up with the idea, make the commitment, follow through, and we will be with you every step of the way. And we will help you find new partners, and we will help you find resources to fulfill your commitments. It is now my pleasure to introduce one of the coalition's members, Haneem Ahmad, of the old Omdurman Emergency Response Room, who will give us an update on their commitment to ending the suffering in Sudan. Coalition.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Secretary Clinton. I am Hanin Ahmed, External Relations Officer in Emergency Response Rooms in Sudan. In a makeshift clinic in Khartoum, a doctor, once a officer, stitches a wound by flashlight. In a remote village in Darfur, volunteers negotiate with armed groups for a single corridor to deliver food. These are emergency response rooms, not buildings, but networks of forge. Picture what condition they are facing, a community under siege in a fashion of Darfur. In Kadugli and a village South Kordofan, cut off from the world, no hospitals, no clean waters. Then an outbreak, cholera, dengue fever, a child falls ill. In this moment, the ERs are the first and the only responders. They are the early warning system, the rapid response team, then the trusted messengers, all in one. Their value, built on local access, knowledge, and trust is irreplaceable. They are the moment we realize that to save a nation, we must empower its people. We are solving man-made problems with women and youth-led grassroots movement. The terrifying diversity of this conflict demands on diversity of approaches. In one locality, a room is a telemedicine hub. In another, it's women-led collective distributing seeds and tools. In a third, it's youth volunteers providing life-saving activities. This hyper-local agile model is our strength. We recognized then that the most effective response to the crisis was not arriving from outside, it was waiting from within. It was found in the forge of local volunteers, teachers, engineers, students. Our commitment to action is to fortify and expand emergency response rooms as a lifeline for